Greetings, St. Barnabas members and friends. So in today's reflection on the Lord's Prayer, I want to back away a little bit from the particulars and talk more in general about the Lord's Prayer as a roadmap or a guidebook for the spiritual journey. First of all, let me say that the pattern, the foundational pattern of the spiritual journey shows up lots of places in the scriptures. There are several places where there is a teaching in the scriptures that could be considered a roadmap for the spiritual journey. And I commented previously that the Beatitudes provide another way of a guide or a roadmap. And at the foundation level, the spiritual journey is what word do I use? It's innate or integral to the human situation. And so, of course, it would show up in many different ways in the scriptures. But what makes the Lord's Prayer especially helpful, of all the places that I see the spiritual journey in the scriptures, the Lord's Prayer is the most helpful because it's so very practical, and it's specific and particular and practical as prayer. And and what I mean by that is, remember that prayer is a synonym for relationship with God. So it gives us a very particular and practical instruction, and not just instruction, but how to be in relationship with God, what to do in the relationship. And so the Lord's Prayer is, for me, it's unique in that regard. And then secondly, as I've said before, it has layers in it. It just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Or another way to say that is, it takes us deeper and deeper and deeper into our own self and into the journey of being in relationship with God. And it takes us deeper and deeper and deeper into that relationship. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that by comparing it to a place in the Gospel of John where we see the spiritual journey. And by the way, the Gospel of John is rich, perhaps the richest of the Gospels with regard to the intimacy that we can have with God and with Jesus. So on the other hand, again, the Lord's Prayer provides, for me, the most practical practical what to do to be growing in the relationship. So and this year in our Easter text, Easter Day, we had the story of Mary Magdalene encountering Jesus in the empty tomb. And then the following Sunday, we had the story of Jesus appearing to the disciples. And at the end of Mary Magdalene's encounter with Jesus, Jesus said to her, "Go to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and their Father, to my God and their God," which I understand to mean the same relationship they've seen me have with God, whom I call Abba, they now can have that same relationship. Then, immediately following that is when Jesus appears to the disciples in the locked room, and he appears to them and says, "Peace to you." And he says it twice, and I understand him to be imparting his peace to them. Now, interestingly, Jesus imparts his peace, but they don't really receive it. And that's indicative of the lifetime of the spiritual journey, a lifetime of living into the peace that Jesus gives to us. And he also says to them, receive the Spirit. And then he breathes on them and bestows the Spirit upon them. And again, Jesus bestows the Spirit, and it will be a lifetime of them receiving the Spirit that Jesus bestows upon them. Then he sends them into the world to be forgivers. And he says this, so I've talked a lot about forgiveness, so I'm not going to do that again now, but But it's just so poignant. Whosever sins you forgive are forgiven, and whosever you retain are retained. And what I've already said about forgiveness, I hope makes that clear. What we see is that we're either locked up in unforgiveness or free in forgiveness. So notice the pattern. He invites them to be in a relationship with God, who is their Father, Abba. He invites them to come to peace. He invites them to receive the Holy Spirit, that is the supersubstantial bread of the Spirit, as we've seen in the Lord's Prayer. And he invites them into the ministry of forgiveness, which I previously said is perhaps at the heart of everything, if not everything, in the spiritual journey. So we see the same pattern in the Lord's Prayer. The one place where it might seem to be a little different is in when Jesus says, "Peace to you." But what I want to offer to you is that the first three petitions of the Lord's Prayer are the way of coming to peace. So the Lord's Prayer begins with entering into relationship with your God as Abba. And as you've heard me say, Abba of us who dwells in the heavens. It's an entrance into the spiritual dimension of letting oneself go into the relationship. And then let be hallowed the name of you. Let come the kingdom of you. Let happen the will of you is all about letting go of our self-made self and coming to peace. Coming to peace in the work that God can do in our hearts. Coming to peace in God hallowing the name in us and in me and in us. In God bringing the kingdom in me and in us. In God bringing God's will in me and in us. And that's how we come to peace. So what happens is the Lord's Prayer gives us the way of entering into relationship with God as Abba, gives us the way of coming to peace, gives us the way of receiving the supersubstantial bread of the Spirit, and sends us into the world to be forgivers. And again, that's why for me, the Lord's Prayer is this wonderful, practical guide for being in relationship with God, being on the spiritual journey, and being God's partner in hallowing the name, bringing the kingdom, and letting the will of God happen as in heaven, also on earth. More later. Peace to you.